Hello and good morning, everybody. Welcome to live session number 9, where we're talking all about everyone's favourite setting boundaries. So, this was again another really highly requested topic, and it's so important. It's like one of the best things to do for burnout prevention, for burnout recovery, but it's also one of the hardest, and it's one of the hardest things to get right because there's been some like bad press about boundaries and setting kind of the wrong kind of boundaries recently. If you follow pop culture, then you might know what I'm talking about. But yeah, getting the right boundaries, getting the right balance of boundaries is really, really important. And it's so important to protect ourselves, but also for the relationships that we have with other people, right? So what I want to look at today is how we set healthy boundaries and how we can also accept other people's boundaries. And again, this is really, really important for burnout prevention and burnout recovery. Now, if you do not have the right boundaries in place, it can increase your cortisol and your adrenaline levels, right? So you can get really stressed because people are testing you and they're pushing you. And so this contributes to burnout because it's contributing to chronic stress, but it can also just make you feel overwhelmed. It can make you feel fatigued. It can make you feel anxious. So there's loads of reasons why setting the right boundaries and setting healthy boundaries is really, really important. And like I said, it's about finding the right balance, right? So we want boundaries that are not too rigid. We don't want boundaries that make our relationships with other people really, really difficult. That's not healthy at all. But we also don't want boundaries that mean that we become a pushover or that we're a people pleaser. So it's really about finding that balance of boundaries that help us maintain really good relationships with other people, but also that means that we don't get walked all over. So that's kind of the balance that we have to achieve. And I've written down what I think healthy boundaries looks like. It might be slightly different for you. And there's lots of different areas of our lives that we can have boundaries in. So the first one that I've written down here is healthy boundaries. It looks like mutual respect and valuing each other's opinions. So having that mutual respect, having that value for each other and understanding and appreciating that we're all different. We've all got our own boundaries, we've all got our own values, we've all got our own opinions. So that's the first one. The second thing that I've written down is clear expectations on both sides. I know what I want from you, and you know what you want from me, and what we can expect from each other. So, clear expectations is another really, really important thing. The third one, and this is probably what you think of when it comes to boundaries, is being able to say no and also being able to accept when other people say no to us. So this is again, this is thinking about that balance. It's not just these are my boundaries, this is my wall, like it or lump it, because chances are, you'll have some very strained relationships if that's the case. But this is about give and take. So these are my boundaries, but also I accept yours. And like I said, this will be different with different people. This will be different in different situations. This will be different throughout different cultures. There will be different boundaries for all different kinds of scenarios. And we can set boundaries on our physical selves, emotional selves, our time, our money, which is a big one. We can set sexual boundaries. We can set sexual boundaries in relationships. We can set financial boundaries with family. We can set time boundaries at work. So there's so many different types of boundaries that you can set across all different aspects of your life. So what we're going to look at is how we do that. And if you've got a pen and paper, I would highly recommend jotting this down. If not, these are always available to watch back live. And you can just think about these for now and then come back to it at another point. So the first thing that I want you to think about when setting boundaries is who. Who are you going to be setting boundaries with? So is this going to be everyone you've ever met? Is it going to be your boss at work? Is it going to be specific family members or people that you're in a relationship with or friends? And what I want you to kind of do with this when you think about who you're setting boundaries with is to make a list from easiest to hardest, right? Because we're kind of going to do this in a graded exposure kind of way. We're going to start with the easiest people to set boundaries with, and then we're going to work our way up to the hardest. So when you think about who you'd like to set boundaries with, start with a list. The first person at the top is the first person that you're going to test this out on. So particularly if you really, really struggle to say no or to set any kind of boundaries, doing it in this way makes it easier so that when you get to the last person on the list, the person who's really, really hard to set any kind of boundaries with, you've had plenty of practice, you know exactly what you're doing. So writing that who list, who am I going to be setting boundaries with? And then the next thing to think about is why. So you might think, oh, let's move on to what boundaries or how or whatever. But actually, let's think about why we want to set boundaries with each person. And this could be because they take up a lot of your time or energy. It might be they're the kind of people that are always asking for things from you. Maybe they're always asking for money. Maybe they're always asking for your time. So really thinking about why you want to set boundaries with that person. It might be that that person feels like one of the main reasons that you're burning out or you're particularly stressed. Or it might be that they make you feel uncomfortable in some way. So having this list of who and then why can help us with the rest, because you know who we want to set boundaries with and exactly why we want to do that. So whenever we then have a little bit of a wobble and we're like, oh no, I don't think I can set boundaries, we're like, well, actually, no, look, I've written down why I want to set boundaries with this person. It's really, really important that I do that for these reasons. And that's what I'm going to be doing. So then once you've got your who's and your whys, you're going to do what? What do those boundaries look like with that person? And remember here to think about balance. So again, we're talking about that healthy balance, that it's not too rigid, but it's also not too loose. And you want to create a situation where the other person feels like they have clear expectations of you as well. So who am I going to be setting boundaries with? Why am I going to be setting boundaries with them? And what do these boundaries look like? It might be that the boundary looks like you cut them out of your life. You know, it might be that extreme. If they really are causing you untold amounts of stress and burnout, then it might be that they're just no good for you in your life. But chances are they are kind of a set of rules. So actually, I want to spend less time with that person, or I don't want them asking me for money anymore, or I don't want my boss putting too much on my plate anymore. So really thinking about what those boundaries look like for you and thinking about that balance, that give and take. And then we get on to how. So now we're actually going to set the boundaries, and this is the important bit. And like we did with the who list, let's start slowly and easy by setting a few easier boundaries. So starting with the easiest person to set boundaries with and making sure that those boundaries are easier to do, basically. So then practice makes perfect, even with things like setting boundaries. So working your way up through the difficulty levels effectively. One really important thing to do with boundaries is to communicate them really clearly. And this doesn't mean shouting at people at all, completely, definitely not. This is having a conversation with someone where you clearly set out your expectations, what it is that you want from them. So it may be, I want you to stop asking me for money, please. I'm not being rude in setting that expectation, but it can be really hard to say, you know, and maybe we've been making excuses for weeks or months or years. Oh no, actually I don't have any money, or I want you to stop asking me for money, please. It's very clear, and you're communicating it without any emotion, without any anger, which is really important. The next thing is to keep consistent even when you're being pushed. So let's take that money example. Let's say it's a family member, they're always asking for money. You've said to them, I want you to stop asking me for money, please. A week later, they're texting you, can I borrow some money? Be consistent. I want you to stop asking me for money, please. We've had this chat. Please, can you stop asking me for money? And you will get people who test your boundaries, who push your boundaries. And that is normal. But that doesn't mean we have to give in. It just means that we have to communicate clearly, once again, consistently. I'm not going to do that. I want you to stop asking me for money. And I've written here, be polite. And this is hard, right? Because sometimes you get so annoyed, particularly when you're repeating yourself. So you're like trying to be consistent, you're being pushed, and you just want to be like, I've asked you. But then you will start to feel guilty and shame will start to come in, and you're like, oh no, maybe I shouldn't have snapped at them. Maybe I should just lend them some money. So be very direct, but be polite with it. Please stop asking me for money. Please. I've asked. Accept that it might feel uncomfortable. Even as I'm kind of role playing this, I feel uncomfortable in this situation because I am a self-confessed people pleaser. It's one of the reasons that I burnt out. I have people in my life had people in my life that wanted to take a lot. And I really, really struggled. I really struggled to say no for various different reasons. And we all have our reasons, normally stemming back from childhood, as to why we're in this situation. And it's not our fault, but it can feel really uncomfortable, particularly in the beginning. And that's why we do that kind of graded exposure. So the who list, starting with the easiest and starting slowly with easy boundaries to set. And the last thing that I want to kind of reiterate is, don't overthink this. Don't go too far. Don't be like, I have to boundary every aspect of my life. Every person that I meet, I've got to set clear boundaries, because as humans, we have gut instinct, right? We know when something doesn't quite feel right, and we don't necessarily always have to go up to someone and say, hi, I'm Bex, these are my boundaries, right? We can test the waters with people and we can see how relationships develop. And this is what I was saying again about having that balance, making sure that it's not so rigid that it probably stresses you out more, it makes you overthink, and it makes relationships a real struggle, but also not too loose that you end up as a self-confessed people pleaser. So really, really think about that balance as you're going through your who's, your why's, your what's, and how you're going to do it. Think about that balance and think about how it can be give and take. So, I want you to stop asking me for money. Is there any way that I can help you in a different way? Can we, help set you up with benefits? Is there a reason that you're really struggling? Can I help you with a little bit of time that I'm willing to volunteer now that will help you in the future? So thinking about that give and take, and not just necessarily being this really closed off, no, 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 but how can I help you in a different way? So that is it. That is boundaries kind of in a nutshell. We've got some amazing lessons on the platform from Gemma, therapist, on people pleasing and saying no. So if you want to dig into this more, then have a look on the platform. I will link them in the lesson comments and in the Instagram bio as well. And that is it. Please let me know if you've got any questions in the comments, and I will see you again tomorrow morning. Take care. Bye-bye.